I am Generation X. Right smack in the middle, 1973, people. So for me, when I was a teenager coming home from school and turning on the TV, there was always Star Trek The Next Generation. Later, we got DS9 and Voyager, but I spent 10 years of my life watching Trek right before dinner. So for me, the 90s era Trek is the best Star Trek. Sorry. This is the review of Champions, and I'm your host, Grandmaster. With me is a powerful panel made up of the finest champions Cigar has to offer. Let me introduce them to you. First up, we have Merv. How are you, man?
Not too bad.
We have the original, Mr. Taylor first. How are you?
I am excellent.
And voice only, we have Mr. Lord Deathman. How are you?
I'm functioning perfectly today.
Oh, that's good. Me too, man. This is episode 12 of the Star Trek Project, where we will be reviewing Star Trek, all of it in order of release, kinda. But today we're going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2. But before we do, I want to ask you all to help us out. Like and share this video and subscribe to our channel and join our forum at Sakarda.freeforums.net. Just click on the link in the description. You can set up an account, get to know us, and join us on our shows. We would love to have you on the show. As mentioned, we will be discussing the 22 episodes of Season 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation today. So let's dive right into it. And we do that by our section called Grandmaster Picks. That's a section where I get to pick 3 episodes for the champions to discuss. And this time I have picked Elementary, Dear Data, Q-Who, and The Emissary. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Lord Deathman. Those 3 episodes, which one is your favorite? Can you discuss them all 3? I want to hear your thoughts on those 3.
Oh, wow. I'm going to pick a favorite here just to help us manage time. Q Who, I think, stands out to me of the 3, although all 3 that you've mentioned are incredible episodes. This is our sort of reintroduction to Q, who I think in his first appearance was somewhat confusing as a character. It was, where I was in terms of my, adolescence slash childhood development there. Couldn't quite make sense of Q and his ongoing test of humanity. But this episode kind of puts him, squarely in the villain role. There's no, he's not like secretly trying to assist us. He just keeps creating more peril and more calamities. And as he flings the Enterprise into the Delta Quadrant, we meet, one of the most iconic enemies of Star Trek, bad guys that would persist on for decades. So John Delancey gives us an incredible performance as Q. Not a lot of people really give him the credit he deserves for creating this really sinister and kind of jokingly diabolical character at every turn. But there's some great dialogue in that episode. There's like weird kind of sequences and special effects of him using his powers. Yeah, I think at one point he turns into like a soldier from the future who literally takes some narcotics, and that's supposed to be a commentary on where Earth will be sometime in the 21st century. Uh, but it's a really thrilling and exciting episode. It was really suspenseful, and I every time I watch it, I'm able to sort of recapture that suspensefulness, the joy of watching it, the excitement of seeing that episode. Always a little bit of it sticks with me when I rewatch that episode. But yeah, Q Hugh would be my favorite out of the bunch that you mentioned.
Okay, any thoughts, maybe quick, on Elementary, Dear Data, or The Emissary?
Well, both of those are barn burners. Yes, I think with Elementary Dear Data, that one probably is my all-time favorite Data episode, and it's hard to believe because you got a lot of Data episodes in the bunch to sort of pick from. But getting used to the character and kind of understanding that he has this um, fascination with the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle legendarium of Sherlock Holmes. So we get a little bit of insight into the character. I think that one goes into establishing his friendship with Geordie. So there's a lot of character development for Data that goes on just besides the dilemma and the action of that episode that I think is just fantastic in terms of building out a well-rounded character that would one day become one. And I know that there are a couple of us here on the panel that are not like huge Data fans, but for those of us who are, yeah, this really sort of gave us the background and development and further buildup of the Data character. Um, but yeah, obviously the holodeck creating mayhem there. You know, I forget the actor who his name who played Moriarty, but again, another unsung guest actor of the Star Trek world, who I think comes back a couple of times, and even in the modern age, fantastic performance there. So high marks for that one. You picked three really hard ones to be against in any way, Grandmaster. So you know this feels like it was a setup from the very beginning.
Yeah, the actor's name is Daniel Davis. Merv, you are watching Star Trek for the first time, so you missed, I think, the last two episodes of the Star Trek project. But anyway, how are you enjoying the Next Generation compared to the original series? And any particular thoughts on, for say, the Emissary or Q Who, where you meet the Borg for the first time? I would like to know.
As far as the show, I feel like I'm enjoying it more than the original series. I I think I ditched my notes on season one, but I had some notes written that was basically like they did a lot of things. A lot of my issues with the original series, they fixed by the time the new generation comes around. Which was like the original series hour-long episodes kind of felt a little bit too long for the amount of meat that they were telling in the story, and I feel like the Next Generation, whether it's more commercials or whatever the case may be, they squeezed it down a little bit to a more digestible pace time, runtime, and that sort of thing, for me at least. In There's a far deeper cast, I feel like, in this. In the original, it was like the big three and then like a couple of secondary things. But in the first season of The Next Generation, and especially in the second season, which is a big highlight, they do a really good job of making sure everyone gets like different times to shine. Like sometimes it might be a couple in like the same episode, but like they really do a really good job of dispersing the attention, the spotlight on different characters. You still know that like Picard's in charge and stuff like that, but like they do a really good job of making sure that you don't forget who they all are in the meantime. Where even in season one there was a little bit of that with I can't remember her name, the character who got killed off, but yes. But in the second season, I feel like there's not that at all. I never felt like anybody was getting like left out or forgotten about or even duplicated up, like as far as personality wise. You know what I mean? Like everyone feels very individual, and it's really blossoming into that. The further I get in this series, I'm currently like midway through season 3. And I plan to pick it up a little bit faster. You know, there's been a lot of TV the last couple months, so it's been hard to squeeze it in. But there should be some downtime coming up. But yeah, really enjoying The Next Generation so far.
Yeah, and for the people,
I probably screwed that.
the next generation. You can say TNG, same abbreviation.
The new class.
For the people, for those who don't know, Merv has actually two very controversial opinions, which are not, if you're a lifelong Trekkie and especially a fan of the Next Generation, may not go down well. One is that he likes Dr. Pulaski more than he likes Dr. Crusher. And the second one is that he actually, and the second one is actually that he, like I had to expressed in the previous episode of the Star Trek Project that he actually likes Wesley Crusher. So what's up with that, Merv? Are we all wrong? Are your fresh eyes right, or is it a generational thing?
I'm just gonna say I have zero crowd bias. I'm not watching these with any other people. I'm not watching it at the time whenever people are talking about it too much. So I'm just gonna say that I'm probably right, given the situation. No, I mean Wesley. I think maybe it's my new eyes to Star Trek as a whole, but like Wesley seems to get a lot of the coming of age might be a little loose of a term, but like I feel like he's a good surrogate for somebody who is seeing a lot of this for the first time, and despite him being like really good at everything and maybe arguably too good at some things, but that's a running thing I think in the episodes that I've watched at least, where sometimes the characters are dumb, for the sake of the plot. But I really liked Wesley, especially in season 1. Season 2, he's fine, but he wasn't one of my top 3 in season 2, just because other characters stepped it up a notch in my eyes. Had some really really strong episodes. As far as Pulaski goes, I think I said this on the board, but I got really strong McCoy vibes from Pulaski the whole season. So I was drawn to her right away. I really liked her hard nosed, like kind of, not curmudgeon's is too strong of a word, but she's like she felt like a no nonsense doctor, like like willing to go toe to toe with whoever just because she knew she was right. And I don't know, there's something about that stubbornness, and it felt a lot like McCoy from the original series that like I really missed it. I realized I missed it whenever Pulaski showed up, that I was missing McCoy in something. So that was kind of interesting. But okay. Yeah, I'm now currently in season 3 where she's not there, and I'm sad a little bit.
And you will never see her again. Sorry.
Don't say that.
But anyway, okay. Enough about that. Quick thoughts on those 3 episodes.
Yeah, Q-Who I think is like one of the bigger pivotal. It felt like a pivotal episode for this season, and probably series moving forward. Like I am aware of a lot of things about the Next Generation TNG, because the movies were coming out when I was like growing up and even into my adulthood a little bit. So I've seen some of those, so I'm familiar a little bit. So I know that like when they introduce the Borg, I know the Borg are going to be around. And even in that episode, if you didn't know the Borg are going to be around, that's what that episode is there to tell you, is that like, okay, the Borg are a thing, and they the only way they got away is because Q is like a god or something. They basically prayed to a god and asked him to get them as far away from the Borg as possible. That's the only reason they're still alive. So he put them in that situation and then pulled them out of it. But I thought that was kind of a landmark episode that felt like a very important episode. Elementary, My Dear Data, I really enjoyed the Moriarty character in that. Just the evolution that he goes through. You're basically watching AI like gain sentience and a feeling of like self-being and honestly preservation. And in the end, he kind of gives up that power, which I think is a really like bold step to take. It's not a step that those stories always take. It's a lot of times they're more you're going to kill me? What do you mean? Like I've got to destroy the ship or the galaxy or whatever. It could have very easily turned evil, but the opposite kind of happened, and I really appreciated that about it. The Emissary, just based on the episode that I picked as to talk about, I really like the Klingons as a species, as a culture, as all that stuff. So pretty much any episode that features Klingons so far, I've really, really enjoyed. And it's weird that I like Worf, but he's probably not my favorite character. But I really love like whenever other people are dealing with like, especially groups of Klingons, because they are a culture into themselves, and it's very like almost like Viking-esque, or slightly barbaric, a little savage, but it's like also kind of equal footing, like especially between men and women. And I don't know, it's a very unique experience getting to see the Klingons at work. So I really like those episodes, any of that feature the Klingons.
Yeah, well, 90s track actually was the moment where they, and I'm talking about 1987 until 2005, where they actually really started to deepen Klingon culture and explore it more. And Worf is a vessel for that. You will get a lot more from that. So you have a lot to look forward to. Taylor, finally, I get to you. Those 3 episodes. Any thoughts?
Well, of course, I like Q Who because it does introduce the Borg. It is the first meeting with the Borg. I love the design of the Borg. I think they're a really cool species. So it is, like you said, it's a pivotal episode. I like Elementary, My Dear Data, because one, I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and I love that they were using the holodeck to do that. The actor that plays Moriarty is great. He's in many things. He was the butler in The Nanny, if you ever watched that show. But he does a great job as Moriarty, and he does come back a couple of times, I think, in the future. Emissary, yeah, we meet Worf's old girlfriend, so that's always cool. And Merv, I don't know where you are. You said you're in 3, so you may not know it yet, but there's going to be fallout from that relationship, okay, coming up. But yeah, they're all solid episodes. This season, like Merv said, it really finds its footing, I think, as a show a lot in this season. I think it's a much better than the first season, which is good. But I think this season is much better. They do a better job of building not just the personalities of the characters, but also they get a lot more comfortable in exactly whose job is which. Whereas in the first season, everyone seemed to be doing every job at the same time. They get a little bit better. I think a great decision was, of course, making Geordi the chief engineer, because they really needed a strong character in that role, a permanent character down there. So they did a great job there. I actually like Dr. Pulaski. I don't necessarily like her as much as Dr. Crusher, but I thought she was very good in this season and did a good job. We get introduced to a couple of things in this season, including 10 Forward and Guinan, which didn't appear in the first season. Chief O'Brien is an actual character now in this season, a little bit. The actor was actually kind of in the background a couple of times in the first season, but in this season is where he gets a name and a character and a job. He's, transporter chief. And again, Merv, going forward, he becomes a really pivotal character in this universe as time goes on. So it's great to see him first showing up here. They do a little better with the lighting this season too. I know the first season had a lot of budgetary constraints, but they get a little bit better with the lighting here, where it's not everything is perfectly lit all the time and everything looks really super flat like it did in the first season. They get a little bit more creative and artistic with some of the lighting. The music is still kind of bad at this point, but improvements all around. So yeah, those are my thoughts on those 3 episodes. All solid episodes. There have been many solid episodes this season. Those 3 are all solid episodes, and I think this season is really where the show kind of starts taking off.
Yeah, I agree. Well, talking about those solid episodes, I also asked the champions to pick a few episodes themselves, or at least one. And Taylor, why don't you go first with your episode?
Yeah, the one episode I wanted to talk about was Time Squared. Not because it's the best episode of the season by any means. It's a solid episode. But what I really liked about it was the way they handled a person being displaced out of time. Okay, it's kind of a unique twist on the time travel thing. The setup of the episode, of course, is the Enterprise finds a shuttlecraft, a Federation shuttlecraft. They bring it on board. They realize it's one of theirs. And Captain Picard is inside of it, but it's a shuttle and Captain Picard from like 6 hours in the future. And they handled it in such a way that because that person and that machine were out of time. They were not in their proper time. Everything was this kind of backwards and a little bit off and a little bit reversed. And like first he was unconscious, and then even when he woke up, he couldn't communicate or recognize things. And as he got closer to the time where he existed, you know, it slowly becomes more coherent and improves on that. And I just thought that was a pretty interesting twist on dealing with time travel. Usually, hey, I'm from the future, and blah 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 blah. Everything's normal, but no, everything is just a little bit off. his bodily functions are all a little bit different. His readings and everything's a little different. His thoughts and everything, and he himself is out of time, so he's disoriented. And of course, the shuttle, the machinery, the computers, they have to use positive instead of negative, charge on the switches and stuff to get it to charge up again, because it's wrong. It's not supposed to be there at that time. So I just thought the way they handled that was really smart. And of course, Jean-Luc Picard, forgetting the actor's name, I'm sorry.
Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart, thank you. Patrick Stewart did a really good job of acting, as he always does, but playing his future self, who is in that situation where he has been thrust out of time. He's witnessed the Enterprise blowing up, and playing that character, and then playing his own character, seeing that character and seeing that character's decisions had caused the destruction of the Enterprise, and then second guessing himself and thinking about, well, what decision was I supposed to make? What decision did I make? Yeah, again, just great acting on his part to show that, that conundrum that he was in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that episode, but I love a lot of episodes from season 2. Like you said, there are a lot of solid episodes. Lord definitely also picked that one episode. Please, let's hear it.
I did. I picked an episode called The Royale, which probably is not the best episode of Star Trek ever, or even the best episode of this season of Star Trek on TNG. But I think that this particular episode has a lot of features that really make me a fan of the franchise. I think the way this episode was handled, it just tackles the world building of Star Trek in a way that shows you that things are connected. And I love it when they kind of try to tie the past of our history to the future of this, fictional Star Trek universe. So this episode starts out with the way Star Trek episodes typically start out. The Enterprise is heading to an unmapped sector of space, and they encounter some type of an anomaly or an object or something of that nature. In this case, it's a fragment of an old style NASA space vehicle, and it dramatically shows you the NASA logo and an American flag when they beam it onto to the pad on the ship, and thus begins this mystery. Like, how could this prehistoric, from their point of view, vehicle have made it this far out into space? What's going on? There's a planet down below that can sort of unearth the mystery. And when they beam down to the planet, they do send an away team, which consists of Worf, Riker, and was it LaForge on that away team? No, it was Data. It was Data, my bad. So those three guys get beamed down to the planet to kind of investigate, and they're confronted by this all black sort of featureless void, which has a revolving door for no apparent reason. And they're questioning whether they should go through the door, what it means. They're wondering how there's an oxygen atmosphere for them to sort of be able to breathe. Obviously, this is the work of ancient aliens or some force that is more powerful than the Enterprise. But they go in, and they're pretty much on the set of like an 80s style casino. And I'm actually pretty sure that the casino set that they get trapped in, because they can't go back through the revolving door once they go forward, was on another TV show. So I think it got recycled. And somebody was like, "How can we save money in season 2?" Yeah, there's a standing set here that nobody's booked. Let's write a whole episode around it. But uh there's just great fun in the episode where they're kind of trapped in a simulation created by aliens based on a really bad novel. So somebody wrote an incredibly bad it's one of these sort of tawdry crime sleazy sex novels, probably of the 70s or whatever have you, but it revolves around an illicit affair, some mafiosos, intrigue at a hotel casino, and the aliens architected the whole world assuming that that was representative of earth culture based on the novel that the astronauts had on the space vehicle, the NASA vehicle that was recovered by the Enterprise. I just thought that was just hilarious, right? That these aliens thought this is how they live, right? We're going to make a whole world dedicated to this show where there's a mafioso named Mickey D, and a bunch of other colorful characters. There's some investors who are trying to buy out the hotel in the book, and they try to incorporate that into the simulation. But it's a little bit of a puzzle because the three away team members have to figure out how do we get out of this place, because there only seems to be a lobby and then some rooms upstairs in the hotel. So the aliens thought that that was the whole of human civilization, this one hotel. But they figure it out. They figure out that in order to get out of the simulation, they have to resolve the conflict of the original novel, which is to find a way to break the bank at the casino and buy the hotel, and then they can leave through the same revolving doors that they came through. But Star Trek has had this great tradition of placing some of its episodes in what look like contemporary settings based on some conceit in the episode. For some reason, you're going to end up on a street in 1960s Chicago because the episode involves some time travel, or people who have copied that culture or whatever on an alien planet. And I thought this was just a wonderful example of how they kept the tradition of the old series alive, while sort of bringing something a little new and a bit more sophisticated than what they'd done in the Kirk era. But yeah, just a wonderful episode. I always enjoy watching it, but I could understand how it might not rank as an all-time favorite for Star Trek fans out there.
Well, I distinctly remember this episode, also because I rewatched season 2 not too long ago. But yeah, it is that one that stands out, because it's not like happening in space or anything. It's yeah, I like it that you picked it. So, Merv, I also asked you to pick an episode.
Yeah, I went
Which
with
one?
Matter of Honor, which
Okay.
features an officer exchange program where Riker gets set to be, I think, first mate or something like that, for a Klingon vessel. And I don't know if there were Klingon heavy episodes before this. I can't remember exactly, but this was the first one where I remember feeling like I could watch an entire show or at least a couple episodes based around just the Klingon ship and their interactions, because it's very different dynamic than the Enterprise in a lot of enjoyable ways. As I already kind of said before, like the Klingon atmosphere, like just drew me right in. But the biggest thing about this episode was like Riker wasn't necessarily my favorite character in season 1. Not that I hated him, but like this episode in particular, and one later on, really catapulted him up my rankings as far as like characters I'm looking forward to, like if an episode is heavily centered on a certain character, this episode did that for Riker for me, because his enthusiasm with going to be a part of this Klingon ship and experience their culture, and trying to getting used to the food and trying to understand like how they interact and like what's okay and what's not okay, and like their hard lines are different than like the Enterprises and the Federation. It was just really interesting, and he was so excited to be there. Where this is another situation where a lot of times, and even the people around him reacted with like disgust at the idea of eating some of these foods, or like fear at the idea of going to this Klingon ship, because they're kind of like there's still some shaky ground there. It's like the Cold War's over, but it's still 1991 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's not quite there yet. But just his excitement at it really like drew me in. It really made me enjoy that character so much. And then on top of that, you've got the whole Klingon culture that you really experience. And despite the heavy makeup, I immediately recognized Brian Thompson from everything that he's been in. He has such a distinct appearance. He was Clag, the probably the one that most endeared himself to Riker throughout this episode, the Klingon. But he was immediately, I was like, that's the guy. I've seen him a million times before in the 80s and 90s and in movies and TV, but I thought that was funny. And even like the women really liked Riker in this too, the Klingon women. And I guess cherry on top too is one of my favorite episodes from season 1 was the one where like Wesley has to pass like entrance exams, and there was another character who wound up like making Starfleet Academy or whatever. There was like 4 or 5 like junior officers or whatever you want to call it. But one of them was the same species as a character in this, and Wesley even confuses them because they look the same, I guess. But he's the one who kind of inadvertently causes this strife in this episode. So it almost felt like a partial, like the subplot felt like a sequel to that coming of age episode or whatever it was in the first season, the Entrance Academy one. So it felt like a spiritual successor to that storyline, while also like really cementing Riker as one of my favorite characters at this point in the series. So really took a lot from this episode. The other one that I mentioned, I can't remember the name of it, but the one where Riker takes an away team and there's like war games happening, the peak performance episode. That was the other one that really like, for whatever reason, I really appreciated Riker after this by the end of this season because of those 2 episodes in particular.
Oh, good. And now you all go, hey, wait a minute, Grandmaster, champions, you collectively missed one great episode. The Measure of a Man wasn't mentioned by me or any of those champions. And that's because it's so good, we decided we're going to talk about it separately. And for me, I'm just going to throw it out there. Personally, I think it's the single best Star Trek episode of all time. Sorry, Taylor, I really do believe that. Lord Deathman, you had the privilege, if I remember correctly, to meet the writer of this specific episode.
I sure did.
Am I correct?
And it was, yes, you are. And I was at attended a writing workshop where she was one of the speakers, and Melinda being her name. It was just an incredible. She's written 2 of the best episodes of Star Trek, but unfortunately, I think those are the only 2 she'd written in the entire franchise. And I think I want to say that the other one she wrote was Duet in DS9, but I'm jumping ahead as far as Merv is concerned. So yeah, it was interesting to just talk to her years on after the fact about where the inspiration had come from for Measure of the Man. She had worked, and forgive me, the details may be as spotty as this was several years ago that this workshop happened. But that being said, she talked about her prior career before getting into television writing as a lawyer, which the minute she said that, the light bulb goes off in terms of why this feels not authentic as a legal drama, but at least it seemed to be informed by someone who had kind of been in that world and could understand the ideological debate that was going on, underneath the science fiction trappings.
Yeah. Well, to me, this is the single best episode because it deals with a certain theme which is still relevant today, and maybe even more relevant now than it was back in 1988. Human rights, I think they handle it very well without making it. It's on the nose, but it's still very subtle in many ways. And I love the guest actors. I love Bruce Maddox, the actor. I can't remember his name. The Philippa, the judge advocate that is the judge in this particular show. I think both Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart peak in this episode in their acting abilities. And don't forget Jonathan Frakes, who plays Commander Riker. His acting is at a certain moment he's researching, and you can see how subtle he is. He's happy he found his argument, and then he realizes what is happening to data, which is so well acted at a particular moment. I really appreciate his skills in this episode as well. So on so many, it's a courtroom drama, and we as Trekkies we all love courtroom dramas. We get a lot of them. But anyway, Lord F-Man, any particular things you want to talk about in this particular episode?
Wow. There would be a lot, but I am going to try to keep it constrained to my notes here. First off, I think that this is just a perfectly executed episode. There isn't an aspect of it. I mean, sometimes you watch an episode of Star Trek and you're like, oh, that was a strong A story, but maybe the B story was not so great. Or maybe there was an alien design that kind of ruined a nearly perfect episode for you, where you're like, oh, they just painted those people red. That they could have done a little better with that. But this, I feel like, just start to finish, given the constraints of the time, it's a really well put together episode, starting from establishing that Picard had a past relationship with the JAG officer, which kind of sets the stage for the conflict in terms of when they have to sort of adjudicate Data's rights as an individual. And I just love the idea that we go back to to Star Trek the original series, which had great courtroom drama episodes there, and and those writers, that this is what happens when you pay attention, like as a writer, when you look at what makes something special and you try to build on it, when you get to the next iteration of it. So they're like, you know what, they did some great courtroom drama stuff. We're gonna do one too, we're gonna try to have a game of a little bit of one-upsmanship, or a lot of one-upsmanship in this case. But we were at this point in the series where we were all kind of taking Data's autonomy and his sentience and his freedom as an individual for granted. We were like, yeah, this dude's he's a real boy, and he can do whatever he wants. But someone coldly bringing the idea to the forefront that this being could just be a piece of equipment owned by Starfleet, and we'd like to be able to build more of them. So I think we're going to just turn it off and try to reverse engineer Sung's work, and build an entire fleet of these beings. But and it's also, and again, sometimes bringing up the political parts of these things tend to trigger people, but there is a slavery allergy going on in the episode. So the allegory of slavery is there when you create more than one of these datas, when it becomes a dozen, when it becomes 100 or 1,000 of him, and they're all intelligent AI driven beings, and we're controlling their destinies and their rights. Have we created a race of slaves? Guinan is in this episode, and she adds wonderful, subtle commentary on it, the way modern Star Trek writers don't seem to be able to do that kind of thing anymore, without like hitting you with a bludgeon in terms of what their political leanings or agenda might be. But this was just so subtly crafted, and they treat you like adults because they're putting it out there for you to decide. And I think, if I have to be critical of the modern era of Star Trek, they tend to take a lot for granted when it comes to their audiences, and they can't tend to come down firmly on one side or the other of an argument. Where sometimes, I'm not saying that slavery is a nuanced argument by any chance, but they do give you the framework and the opportunity to come to your own conclusions, which I think also makes this episode incredibly strong. And of course, I have ties to it that are both nostalgic and a little bit of insider baseball, having gotten a chance to do Q&A with one of the creators involved. Uh, so yeah, I could go on and on forever about this, but there are real moments, that to conclude this tirade, that really stick with me to this day. When Riker pulls off Data's arm, that was just a blow, and you're like, man, they're gonna win, right? Like, you're really in suspense. You usually know that the good guys are gonna win and everything is gonna work out, but there are a few moments that are so tense in the courtroom drama that you're not 100% sure. And that was definitely a moment for me. I think when he asked Data to kind of demonstrate bending the bar and all of these kinds of things, it's just a wonderfully written episode with a brilliant intent behind it. And you may be right. It could stand up at least in the top 3 episodes of Star Trek all time.
No, everything he said. Taylor, what do you think of The Measure of a Man? Are we onto something?
Well, I mean, it's not as good as Spock's brain, but it is a solid episode. No, it's a very good episode. It's really well written and really well acted by everybody involved. It's riveting to watch. What I like about it is Riker in this. As Merv was saying, Riker is a great character. The actor is not always great. He's good, but he's not always great. But he was really good in this episode because Riker is taken out of his comfort zone in this. All right, Riker is like he's a swashbuckler. Okay, that's one of the things I like about the character. He's all about adventure. He's up for anything. He's like a golden retriever, you know, trapped in a 20th century casino. Yeah, let's figure it out. Let's do it. You know, serve on a Klingon ship. Sign me up. Great, let's go. You know, meeting some strange alien that could destroy us. Hey, let's go in and see what's in there. You know, that's him. He loves that stuff, and that's what I like about that character. He's all about adventure. He's all about action and swashbuckling, and he takes everything that comes and he just rolls with it. But in this episode, he's given a job that he does not want to do, and that is to be the prosecutor in this. He does not want to do it. He struggles with it, but he does it, and he does it really well because that is his duty. And that's probably one of my favorite aspects of this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, I really appreciate his acting when he finds his argument and then realizes what it means, and actually Picard acknowledges Riker's skill as a prosecutor here because he almost convinced Picard he was right. So yeah, that's great. Anything you can say that is negative on this episode, or you agree it's really, really, really good?
I mean, it's a really, really good episode. It's really well written and really well done. I might have actually ruled in favor of Riker's argument. I may have actually voted the other way, but that's just because of how well written it was.
Yeah, well, I have to agree with what Lord Deathman say. Previously, Trek presented all sides of a dilemma and then let you think what you and make up your own mind. Nowadays, they tend to say how you need to think, and that's a difference. But anyway, we will get there in a few years when we discuss modern Trek. Merv, you saw this episode, and you probably read me and Lord Deathman and other people rave about this episode. It's so great, it's fantastic, and then you get to see it for the first time. Did it disappoint?
I mean, it was up there with like the Acolyte as far as quality goes, and no, it was really good. It was at least so far, it doesn't feel like there's been many like courtroom drama episodes of the Next Generation, but this one was fantastic. The whole Data in his relationship with humanity seems to be like the crux of his character, which is always interesting, whether it's him trying to figure out why humans do what they do or him relating to them in some way. There's always layers there. Even if the episode doesn't focus on it. And obviously, this one focuses on it pretty heavily. But my favorite aspect, I think, was how everyone around him reacted to this whole situation. Like, I mean, I don't remember exactly, but I feel like Picard's initial reaction was just flabbergasted and like, there's no way this could possibly, like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what are you talking about? You know, like it just completely like belligerent and uncooperative, which is, maybe it's more him than not, but up to this point, I was like, it feels very like, out of the blue for him. He's normally pretty logical and maybe that's not the right word, but level-headed. But this one really got under his skin, and I really there was a lot of like little side conversations between characters that really drew me in to the point where Data almost seemed not a passenger on this episode, but like he seemed more or less aloof as to whether it went one way or the other. He was just there to do his best, just to present himself. But everyone else is like outrage at this whole situation, or we can look at the one scientist as like the villain of this this episode. His desire to essentially make Data a piece of property just really felt like this is somebody we've watched, or at least I've watched, for a season and a half at this point, and it's like, well, now he's just a prop to people not on this ship, and that's really interesting. And I'll be honest, that makes me like view other properties, like just bringing it right back over to Star Wars for a minute, but like whenever they erase C-3PO's brain in the end of episode 3, it's like all of a sudden that feels a little worse than it did whenever I watched it for the last 20 years. So this really puts a lot of things into perspective, and I just like it because it's like incredibly thought-provoking of an episode, which seems to be the norm for a lot of Star Trek stuff.
Yeah, well, I think, and before I close this episode of the Star Trek Project, my favorite scene of the whole movie is when Picard and Guinan are talking at the bar, and Guinan makes Picard realize what's happening, what actually is happening, and where Picard finds his argument, and that yeah, it's. The writing in this and the acting in this, it's all right up there, and that's why I can watch this episode every day and not get bored one single time. But anyway, after this love letter from us for The Measure of a Man, we will conclude this month's episode of the Star Trek Project. We hope you have enjoyed our discussion today. If you did, help us out, like and share this review, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you really want more of us, click on the link in the description below, and that will bring you to sakar.freeforms.net. You can set up an account and join us, our community. You can do it. Trust me, just click it. We will continue our track in 2025. In January, you can expect episode 13 to drop. So, and don't forget to check out our brand new Skeleton Crew review series. The first episode of that dropped as well this weekend. So, I can also disclose we have some plans for 2025. So hit that subscribe button on YouTube and enjoy our content. For now, I want to thank you all, also on behalf of our champions, and wish you to live long and prosper. Bye.